bisschen since I began the Farbrengen this afternoon, that this Shabbos is the Shabbos of Chazak. In other words, today we concluded in Kriyas HaTorah Sefer Bereshis, and we are going into Sefer Shemos. Sefer Bereshis is also known for another name, Sefer HaYishorim. Yishorim. And the reason, as Chazal explained, because whatever is discussed in Chumash Bereshis relates to us whatever happened to the Yishorim, to the righteous ones, which naturally we're referring here to the Aves and to the Shvatim, which this is what Sefer Bereshis is all about. And this Shabbos is the Siyum of Sefer Bereshis. As it's customary by a Siyum, the Rebbe continues, we will look into the beginning of Sefer Bereshis. There's also a minig that whenever we conclude a Masechta and we begin another Masechta, so we always try tying together the two Masechtas, the one which we are concluding, the one which we are going into, the one which we are beginning. In our case, it's not a Masechta, but here we're talking about Chumash. So we are concluding the Chumash of Bereshis, and we are entering into the Chumash of Shemos. At the beginning of Chumash Bereshis, we all know the famous Rashi, which Rashi tells us why does the Torah begin with the creation of the world rather than beginning with a mitzvah. It's a question which Rashi raises right away at the beginning of Chumash, that the Torah should have rather began with a mitzvah. And the first mitzvah which is discussed in Chumash Shemos is the mitzvah of HaChodesh Hazeh Lochem, where the Rebbe is telling Yidden how to set up the Jewish calendar and thereby thereafter all the details of Korban Pesach. So rather, HaKadosh Baruch Hu did not begin the Torah with a mitzvah, but he begins the Torah telling us how he was the one who created the entire world. And Rashi right away at the beginning of Bereshit gives us reason for this. Koyach ma'asav higid le'amoi loseis lahem nachlas goyim. This is a pasuk which Rashi quotes, which means that the Rebbe is telling us that he is the one that has created this world, and therefore he is the owner of this world, and it is in his will and in his power to give us Eretz Yisrael, which is basically the contents of the first Rashi in Chumash. But again, the Rebbe today went a step further and asked, so actually what is Rashi here telling us? That the beginning of the Torah is with the fact that the Rebbe has created the world, koyach ma'asav higid la'amoi loseis lahem nachlas goyim, so that we should have an excuse for the goyim. That's why we can inherit Eretz Yisrael. And Eretz Yisrael is ours because the Rebbe is the one who's created the world. But the question still remains, is this a reason that the Rebbeinu Shalom should open the Torah with an inyan so that we should have what to respond back to the goyim? And furthermore, as the Rebbe always stresses, what is the hirah, what is the lesson which we can derive from this whole entire inyan? What does it mean to us in day-to-day life? The fact that we learned the first thing in Chumash, we are told how the Rebbe was the one that created the entire world. And koyach ma'asav higid la'amoi is telling us the power of his acts, loseis lahem nachlas goyim, so that we should be able to inherit Eretz Yisrael. So the Rebbe is explaining firstly the continuity between Chumash Bereshis and Chumash Shemos is very obvious. Because in the Chumash of Shemos we have about the Golus, about Golus Mitzrayim, and we also have the inyan of Matan Torah, which came after Yitzias Mitzrayim. We received the Torah from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and this we read about in Chumash Shemos. What we also read about, learn in Chumash Bereshis, is how before Yaakov went into Mitzrayim, as Yehuda Shalach Lafanav Goyshna, he sent Yehuda to Mitzrayim, and Rashi tells us for what reason did he send Yehuda. He sent him that he should start a yeshiva, start a cheder, where Torah should be able to be learned, So here we right away have a tie between Chumash Bereshis and Chumash Mos. One of the main things in Chumash Bereshis deals how is Yaakov's going down into Mitzrayim, and here we find a hemshech to that, and as a prerequisite to Yaakov's going down to Mitzrayim, he arranged that Torah should be able to be learned in Mitzrayim, which just comes behemshech to Chumash Mos, where in Chumash Mos we also read and learn in detail about the Rebbeinu Shalom giving the Torah to Klal Yisrael. The beginning of the Galus actually began already in Chumash Bereshis, because this is what Yaakov's going down into Mitzrayim, or rather even with Yosef going down into Mitzrayim. However, when did Galus really actually begin? It really began in Chumash Mos. So it's all in Yonim how Chumash Bereshis and Chumash Mos is tied together. And here the Rebbe referred to an episode of the Tzemach Tzedek, that a Chassid once asked the Tzemach Tzedek about going to Eretz Yisrael. Chassid wanted to leave Europe and wanted to go Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael. So the Tzemach Tzedek responded to him in Yiddish, Mach da Eretz Yisrael, which means make Eretz Yisrael here. What does this mean? And the Rebbe says, we're talking about a quotation of words which were said by a Nasi Yisrael. So definitely he didn't say anything just tamazoi. So it's definite that every word is accurate. In other words, the idea of Eretz Yisrael is, Eretz Yisrael symbolizes something. Spiritual meaning of Eretz Yisrael. What Eretz Yisrael stands for spiritually. So the Tzemach Tzedek told that Chassid, Mach da Eretz Yisrael. Whatever Eretz Yisrael stands for, you can do here in Chutz La'aretz as well. Actually, there's a Chazal. Chazal tells us, Asida Eretz Yisrael shetispashet b'chol ha'aratzos. That the future will be with Eretz Yisrael, that Eretz Yisrael will spread all over the entire world. Which again corresponds to this idea. The idea of taking what Eretz Yisrael stands for spiritually and putting this into Chutz La'aretz in the entire world, in every single corner, wherever a Yid is. And that is why this is so important that the Torah begins with this. Torah begins with Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim v'sa'aretz. So Rashi tells us, Ma tam posach beBereshis. Why is it so important that the Torah should begin with Bereshis bara Elokim? Shouldn't the Torah rather begin with a mitzvah? Because this is really what Torah is all about. What Torah is all about is commanding us all the mitzvahs which we have to do. The truth is, so Rashi tells us, no, that the Torah begins with koyach ma'asav higid la'amay laseis lahem nachlas goyim. In other words, with a message to each and every Yid that we are to know that we are the balabatim of Eretz Yisrael. And in spiritual sense, as the Rebbe asked before, what is the lesson which we derive from this entire inyan? The lesson which we derive from this entire inyan is that we are told that we today have to convert Eretz Canaan. That's what Canaan was originally. Before it became Eretz Yisrael, it was called Eretz Canaan. What we are told, what we have to do, we have to turn it over. It should no longer be Canaan and make it an inyan of Kedusha. And this is something which a Yid is bekoyach to do all over and at all times. And this comes as the main introduction to Torah, which this is the same idea as the Tzemach Tzedek told his Chassid, Mach da Eretz Yisrael, which is the same concept, to take the Kedusha, the spiritual holiness which lies in Eretz Yisrael, and we have to take this inyan and carry it with us wherever a Yid is throughout the entire world. And the Rebbe added on that it is customary by Yidden that whenever we finish a Chumash, we say in Shul loud, Chazak, Chazak, v'nis Chazak, means an urge to strengthen ourselves. So again today, when we completed Chumash Bereshis, and we said the Chazak, Chazak, v'nis Chazak, that means again the same idea. We have given ourselves strength and power so that we should be able to fulfill this message which Chumash Bereshis is all about, and which this reminds us, which this comes as the first of all Chamashim, meaning this is an introduction to the entire Torah, that we have to have this koyach within ourselves to take the spiritual holiness from Eretz Yisrael and instill it all over wherever a Yid will be, wherever a Yid is. Then the Rebbe continues In continuation to what has been spoken about at recent Farbrengens, about the importance of doing things which will rush for the coming of Mashiach, and how we are all unhappy that Mashiach did not come yet, and the constant call of Ad Masai, how much longer will we be in Galus? So the Rebbe says, in previous occasions, whenever it came out to talk about this, and particularly in the most recent Farbrengens when this inyan was discussed and stressed, the Rebbe says, however, he did not stress what particular role the Jewish woman can play in this entire issue. First of all, the Rebbe says, we know that the woman can be extremely effective when we're talking about the Miftzayim. All of the Miftzayim are step in Afotzas HaMayones and Afotzas HaYadus to bring closer Mashiach. We know that the approach which women take and them asking Yidden to do each of the Miftzayim can be extremely helpful when it comes from a woman. The Rebbe says, even when we're talking about tefillin, which this is something which women are not shayches to, a woman does not put on tefillin. So first of all, we find in Gemara, Lagab other things, that women are rewarded for the fact that they wait for their husbands and their children. And Mamela, they have a share in all of the things which their husband and children do. But even furthermore, the fact that women can talk, whether it's to their husbands or brothers, when it comes from an older sister, or at times it comes from a younger sister, comes from the mother. There are certain times when it comes from the mouth of a woman that it has more impact than when it would come from the mouth of a man. So here we right away see the tremendous and major role which a woman can play, and now preparations for the coming of Mashiach. Rebbe says, but we would like to find a source for everything in the Sedra. And let us look into this week's Sedra and find a source for what we are just talking about. So the Rebbe expressed himself, help the Rebishter. The Rebishter helps that we find a very open message in this week's Sedra. We read in the Torah today, in Parshas Vayechi, how Yaakov was talking, beginning of the Sedra, when Yaakov is talking to Yosef. And he's referring back to the passing of Yosef's mother, Rachel. So Yaakov says how Rachel passed away while they were traveling. Va'ani bivoyi mi padon meisa alai Rachel be'eretz Kenan baderech. It's in Kapitel Mem Ches Pasuk Zayin. And the pasuk continues, Ba'oid kivras eretz lavoy Ephrosa. He was really close by to come to a city called Ephros. However, Yaakov says, Ve'ekpereh Hasham b'derech Ephros hi beis lechem. Where did he really bury her? He did not bury her in Ephros, but he buried her on the road near Beis Lechem. So Rashi tells us that when Yaakov is talking this, referring to all this, and he's talking to Yosef, V'ekpereh Hasham, V'lo yelachti, and I didn't take her, afilu lebeis lechem, I didn't even take her to Beis Lechem. Lach nisa la'aretz, to bring her into Eretz Yisrael. So Yaakov says, Yodati sheyesh b'lipcha alai. I know, Yaakov says, I know that you have a grudge in your heart against me. You have something against me. Why I did this to your mother Rachel? Mentioning this right away, the Rebbe says, here we see a tremendous thing. Torah here teaches us that when one sees something which he doesn't understand, he shouldn't bypass it. And immediately the Rebbe referred us, when we learn Torah, one may say, Torah is that holy, Torah is that great. He has a kasha. So if he has a kasha and he doesn't understand something in Torah, so what? So he doesn't understand. But Torah is definitely right with whatever is mentioned in Torah. So why should he bother to go and find a teretz and an interpretation for the question that he's troubled with? While he's learning Torah, he will say to himself, if it's in Torah, it's definitely accurate. It's not so. When we learn, we have to make it our business that we have to understand everything in Torah. Just like we find here, Yaakov knew that Yosef had something in his heart against him. In other words, Yosef saw his father do something. He was aware that his father did something which he did not understand. So it bothered him. Naturally, the Rebbe says, when we see something done by someone whom we have to respect, Chas v'sholom, it does not mean that we have to lose our respect for that person. And we know there is an inyan of being a meharer achar rabbi. We're not allowed to think if there are a rebbe that he's doing something wrong. But at the same time, the Torah allows us, the Torah leaves room that yesh b'libai, there was something within Yosef's heart. There was some grudge there bothering him. Why is it taka that his father did not take his mother into Eretz Yisrael and at least give her the inyan of burying her in Eretz Yisrael? So this was something which Yaakov stressed at this time. The Rebbe says this is not stam time, this is a serious time, a very, very serious moment in Yaakov's life. It's the moment in Yaakov's life before he's ready to give back his neshama to the Rabbeinu Shalom. So at this moment, he had nothing else to talk to him about but this inyan. So we see the importance of this inyan. And Yaakov stressed to him that he's well aware that he knows that Yosef has it up against him for kind of like not treating his mother properly. But what does Yaakov continue? Dalacha, you should know. Shal pi hadibur kvar ti Hashem. Why did I do this? I did this upon the wish of the Rabbeinu Shalom. Shetehei le'ezra lebaneha, that she should be to assist her children, when Nevuzradin will put Yidden in Golas, and Yidden will be walking through there, and passing by the tomb of Rachel. Rachel will hear how her children are passing by here, something which will happen hundreds of years later. And then Rachel will go out to the Rabbeinu Shalom and complain and ask the Rabbeinu Shalom, V'shavu banim legvulam, the Rabbeinu Shalom should bring back the children back to their boundaries. So here we see the great interest a Jewish woman has, how far a Jewish woman goes to be able to help her Yid. And here the Rebbe stressed, there was the Ma'aras HaMachpelah. And the Ma'aras HaMachpelah, that is where Adam and Chava were buried, Avram and Sarah were buried, Yitzchak and Rivka were buried there, and Yaakov was going to be buried there. And Rachel was well aware of the fact that Yaakov will be buried in Ma'aras HaMachpelah. So it could have been her wish as well that she should be buried together with Yaakov, like Yaakov's parents and grandparents and Adam v'Chava. She overlooked that. For what reason? For the reason that later years she should be able to help her children and come back to Rabbeinu Shalom, that it should be v'shavu banim legvulam. So here the Rebbe says we see the important role that a Jewish woman could play when it comes to help for the coming of Mashiach. We see it from our mother Rachel, that Rachel was willing to sacrifice herself and give in an inyan for herself, which obviously it would have been much better for her to be buried in Ma'aras HaMachpelah. Still she overlooked that and was buried where? Not even in Eretz Yisrael. She was buried on the road in Chutz La'aretz, not even in Beis Lechem. Why? So that it should come in later years, she should be able to help her children. And the Rebbe referred that we know, but again the Yitzias Mitzrayim, we find that b'schus Noshim Tzidkoniyos, the b'schus of the Noshim of that generation, the Yidden were taken out of Mitzrayim. The Rabbeinu Shalom tells us, the Rabbeinu Shalom pledged that he will take the Yidden out of Mitzrayim. He promised to us that when the time will come, he will take us out of Mitzrayim. Still we see that what was the inyan that led to it, that Rabbeinu Shalom should do it at that time, it was in the merit of the Jewish woman. And as Chazal tell us, Jewish women were literally sacrificing their lives and going out into the fields and meeting their husbands there. And as a result of that, the Yiddish Kindalach were born, and the Rabbeinu Shalom made that they should have in a miraculous way, they should have what to feed the little Kindalach that were born in the Galus Mitzrayim. And these infants later, which were born in this severe Galus, when it came to Kriyas Yamsuf, Chazal tell us they were the ones that Heim Hikiru Tchila, they were the first ones to recognize the Rabbeinu Shalom, because they already saw the Rabbeinu Shalom in Mitzrayim when he performed miracles. And they were able to have Vayinikeyu Dvash Misela Vishemen Mechal Mishsur, The Rebbeinu Shalom made a nest that they were able to have honey from stones and oil from rocks. All of this was done in a miraculous way so that the Kinderlach should be able to survive. So these Kinderlach who already saw the Yad Hashem in Mitzrayim, they were the ones that Heimi Kiru Utchila, they were the ones to recognize him again by Kriyas Yamsuf, when the Rebbeinu Shalom appeared to Klal Yisrael. The Rebbe concluded that it's brought in Svarim that the Noshim, the Jewish women that are living in the generation of Ikvis the Mashiach, the generation of before the coming of Mashiach, they are a Gilgal of the women that lived when the Yidden went out of Mitzrayim. So Memela, this again stresses the great shaykhs, and the great role which Jewish women can play, and have a shaykhs and have a hand in doing things these days which will lead to the Gula Shlema, to the coming of Mashiach. The Rebbe continued explaining Rashi in this week's Sedre, as well as also an Indian in the Shia Rambam of today. Regarding the Rashi, Rebbe raised the question on a Rashi at the end of the Sedre, where the pasuk discusses the passing of Yaakov Avinu, and there the pasuk says in Kapitel Memtes pasuk Lamid Gimel, it's after Shishi. Vayichal Yaakov Latzavis is banav, after Yaakov has finished to command all the children whatever he told them. Vayesef Raglav El Amita, Vayigva Vayeosef El Amov. And he went back to his nation. So Rashi stresses Vayigva Vayeosef, means he passed away. Usually, the word which should follow Vayigva and Vayeosef normally would be Vayomos, which Misa in Hebrew means he passed away. So Rashi says Umisa lo nemraboy. It is not mentioned by Yaakov that he died. V'amru Razal, the Chachamim tell us, Yaakov Avinu lo meis, that Yaakov Avinu did not pass away. And this is a Rashi which Rashi learns in Pshuta Shel Mikra, something very strange to tell us that Yaakov did not pass away. What does it mean? Furthermore, Rebbe says, Rashi is quoting a saying from the Razal, that the Razal say, Yaakov Avinu lo meis. What does Rashi say? The Omru Razal, the Razal have said. If this should not be a pshat in Pshuta Shel Mikra, but should only be a drash, then the Rebbe says Rashi would have to use the expression V'doshu Razal. The Chazal have darshened. Rashi doesn't say that word. Rashi says V'omru. That means it is the literal pshat of the pasuk that Yaakov Avinu did not die. What does this mean? And this is something which is put down to the 5-year-old child who's learning Chumash. What's going on here? Furthermore, the Rebbe says, the Gemara Masechta Tainis, when the Gemara brings this interpretation, there the Gemara raises a question on this. There the Gemara raises V'chi b'chdi Chontu chontaya v'sobtu sabdaya. There was the entire procedure which went on with Yaakov's passing away, and it was a regular procedure which is done when somebody passes away. They made the hespedim, they made the eulogies on him, and all the details which we read in the Torah which were done when Yaakov passed away. So how could we say that Yaakov Avinu lo meis? So then the Gemara answers on that. Ma zaroi b'chayim, afhu b'chayim. Being that he has children that are alive and are going in his footsteps, it is credited as if he would be alive. Rashi does not bring that. So that means that without going into this teretz, we can still learn the pasuk Vayigva, Vayeosef, and the pasuk does not say Vayomos, he died, because Yaakov did not die. What does this mean? In fact, pasuk tells us at what age it happened. It happened at the age Yaakov was 147 years old, and as we read in the Rashis, that when in these Sedres, that when one comes within a 5-year period to the passing of his father or mother, that is when he also has to begin worrying. And this is what Yaakov did. And here Rashi all of a sudden tells us, based on the pasuk, that Yaakov did not pass away. And if Rashi does not elaborate on it more, does not explain it more, that means that it is already understood to the child who's learning Chumash, Pashas Vayechi, it is already understood to him from Psukim or from Rashis, which we have learned until now. Where else do we find in Chumash an expression that somebody was taken from the world and he did not die? The Indian of Misa is not applicable. Let us turn back to Chumash Bereshis, and we will find it. In Chumash Bereshis we read regarding Chanoich, in Pashas Bereshis, at the end of Shishi, right away a pasuk before Shvi, Vayishalei Chanoich Esor Elokim, Chanoich went along with the Rabbeinu Shalom, and then the pasuk says, Ve'einenu, he was no longer here. Ki lokach oisei Elokim, because Hashem has taken him away. What does Rashi comment? That it was a different type of a passing away. For a reason, HaKadosh Baruch Hu did not want he should be affected by that generation. It was an evil generation. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu took him away. So we see in Chumash that there is an Indian of HaKadosh Baruch Hu taking one away from the world, and the pasuk does not use the expression of Vayomas. Furthermore, where does the expression of Misa originate? Also in Chumash Bereshis, which we have already learned. Regarding the Eitz Hadas, Adam was told, "B'yoyim acholcha mimenu mois tumas." If he shall eat from the tree, mois tumas, that is it, he will die. What do we see right away from this pasuk? That the inyan of Misa has to do somehow with the inyan of Chet, with sin. When one sins, this leads to an inyan of Misa. Yaakov was at such high madrege that he was not shaykhs to the whole inyan of Misa. Why? Because the whole inyan of Chet was not shaykh by Yaakov. That is why the pasuk does not say Vayomos when it comes to Yaakov, because Yaakov had no relation to this inyan of Misa. So Yaakov's leaving this world was in a completely different way. HaKadosh Baruch Hu handled him, taking him away from the world differently than taking anyone else away from the world. That is why the pasuk says Vayigva, Vayosef. However, the pasuk does not say Vayamos, because Yaakov's parting from the world was in a different way. The general term of Misa, which is used for every human being in this world, does not suit when we're describing Yaakov's passing away from this world. Rebbe says, if so, the question arises, why is Yaakov different than Avraham and Yitzchak? From Yitzchak were the others, there was a tzaddikim. So Rebbe says, really, this is a question not only when we are learning Chumash al pi pshat. This question would arise even if we would learn al pi remez or al pi drush also. We have to find the difference. Why Take Yaakov was treated different than the other of us? The Rebbe says it seems that we can say that the difference between Yaakov and Avraham and Yitzchak was the fact that Yaakov was fortunate to have mitosei shleima, meaning that all of Yaakov's children went in the proper way, as opposed to Avraham and Yitzchak. Avraham, we have yotza mimenu yishmol. Chassidus always stresses the expression yotza mimenu, that came out of him. In other words, it's not his main inyan, his main son is Takanat Yishmael, but still yotza mimenu Yishmael. The same when we're talking about Yitzchak had a yotza mimenu Esav. However, when we're talking about Yaakov, being that Yaakov was fortunate to have mitosei shleima, all of his children went in the proper path, in the path of serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu properly. That is why he was also rewarded in such a way, and he himself was naturally not shaykhs to the inyan of Chet in any way, in any shape or way whatsoever. That is why his parting of this world was in a completely different way than anyone else. Umisa loy nema, as Chazal Taka tell us, Yaakov Avinu loy meis, the expression of meis, the inyan of meis, of Misa did not have a shaykhs to Yaakov. HaKadosh Baruch Hu took him away from this world in a different way. Now let us go to the Rambam. The Rambam in Hilchis Kinyan, the Sefer Kinyan rather, in Hilchis Mechira, we are learning today the dinim beginning with Perik Chav Beis, Ein Adam Makne Davar Shalibala Olam, which means one cannot give away to another one something which is not here yet. If I'm promising you fruit that are going to grow, if the fruit did not grow yet and the fruit are not here yet, this promise, this commitment has no validity. Doesn't mean anything. And the Rambam gives right away this example. Whatever will grow out of this field is sold to you. What this field will give you is given to you. If one says, give whatever this behemoth will give birth to, I'm already giving away to you, this has no meaning whatsoever. Okay. Then we have another halacha in the next parak in the Rambam. If one has a tree, a dekel, and he takes the tree and is it makne, gives it away to another person, and says, whatever will grow on this tree will belong to you, this is a perfect arrangement. What is the difference? The difference here is because he's giving it him together with the tree. The tree is already here now. True that the tree does not have any fruit on it yet. The fruit are due to grow on the tree. However, makna adam haguf lepeirosav, and this can be done bein b'mecher, bein b'matan. It can be done as a gift. It can be done as a sale, as a transaction. The Rambam tells us this is not considered one being makne a dava shalei, one giving away something which is not here yet. Why? Sharei haguf matzui or makne lepeiros, because the guf is here, meaning the guf, the tree is here, or the behemoth. Let's stick to the example of a tree. The tree is here, and if he's doing it in this way, in such type of an arrangement, it is okay. Let us look into another halacha Rambam. Back to Perik Chav Beis, the Rambam tells us that din hahektish is not so. In other words, if one accepts upon himself to give to tzedakah, to give to hektish, something which is not here yet, still he's obligated to fulfill his commitment, his pledge. Because Rambam at the end quotes a pasuk, Kechol hayotze mipiv yaseh. When one accepts upon himself to do something for a holy cause, he has to live up to his pledge, he has to do it, he has to live up to his commitment. These are a few halachas in today's Shir and Rambam. Rambam benegeya this halacha which we just mentioned, regarding to tzedakah or hektish, when one commits to hektish something which was not born yet or did not grow yet, the Rambam tells us that there are go'onim that argue on him. The go'onim do not agree to the Rambam's opinion. However, the Rambam concludes, Ein daiti noite ledvarim elu, he does not agree to the go'onim. His opinion is different. His opinion is that hektish is different than regular dealings amongst one person, one transaction, amongst people one with another. The Rebbe explained these halachas in a pnimius, in other words, in the spiritual aspect of these halachas. Based on the Gemara tells us expression in Gemara, just slipped my mind. The essence of the expression is that everything that one does, he's doing for his master, for the Rabbeinu Shalom. Thank you.
Say it again.
I was created only to serve my master. Mamela is serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rabbi says we serve the Rebishter step by step. We constantly have battles in serving the Rabbeinu Shalom. In other words, there's constantly the Yetzirah, the Nefesh Abhamis, who is interfering to serve the Rabbeinu Shalom. And that is why we are constantly in a battle. In other words, I cannot commit myself today for tomorrow. And I cannot commit myself today for what's going to happen in a few days from now or in a week from now. Similar to the halacha that one cannot be makne something which is not here yet. We are in a constant battle, day after day, hour after hour, minute after minute, with the Yetzer Hara, to be able to serve the Rebishter properly. This is what the Rambam tells us. This is the halacha. However, in Perek Chav Gimel we learn, Makna Adam Haguf lePeirosav. If the person has already taken the entire tree and given away to somebody, that is when he can be in Makna, the fruit also, even if the fruit are not here yet. What does this mean spiritually? This means, Rebbe says, that if the person has already achieved such a madrege, where he has, just like we're talking about a tree, every individual is also a tree. The person has given his entire himself, his entire personality, he is given totally away to the Rabbeinu Shalom. He uplifted himself to such a madrege where he was makdish, he gave away his entire mitzias. He's solely dedicated to the service of the Rebbeinu Shalom, like he feels that he for himself is nothing. He's not in existence in any way other than the fact that to serve the Rebbeinu Shalom. He for himself does not feel his mitzias, does not feel himself in any way. Here, he's already in a much higher madrege. Here already, it can be that he has accomplished it to such an extent that even fruits which are not here yet, things which are due to grow, in other words, for the future is not here yet, it is considered that he's totally given himself away to the dedication of the Rebbeinu Shalom. And the Rebbe says here we see how everything is extremely accurate. We cannot jump a ladder. The way the Rambam discusses these halachas, the first halacha is discussed in Perek Chav Beis, the second halacha is discussed in Perek Chav Gimel. Meaning, first we are talking about our initial approach to serve the Rebbeinu Shalom. Initially, we have not dedicated our complete selves yet to him. Just like in the halacha, we have not given away the dekel, we have not given away the eitz, the fruit, the tree. It's a constant battle of step by step, so that we should be able to serve the Rebbeinu Shalom. Once the Rebishter has helped, that with Hashem's assistance we were successful, and we came over this battle which has been going on constantly, and we cannot make commitments today for tomorrow, because tomorrow it's again a battle. Then a Yid lived up to a madrege where he took his entire tree. In other words, he took his entire self-being and dedicated it to the Rebbeinu Shalom. He for himself doesn't need anything. Whatever he needs and whatever he's doing, whatever he's living for, and everything that he's doing 24 hours a day is only to serve the Rebbeinu Shalom. If so, he's already lifted himself up to a higher madrege. This is not in the same perek. This comes in a separate perek. In other words, the next madrege, the next level. Here, it can already be that if he was makne his entire eitz, the entire tree, in other words, his entire being was given to the Rebbeinu Shalom, then fruits that are due to come, he can also give away. In other words, here we're already talking about a person who is at a level where he knows that he has already solved tomorrow's battle as well, and the day after's battle as well. Why? Because he has changed his entire mitzias, his entire personality was totally changed. It's not that he's totally dedicated, his entire self-being is dedicated to the Rebbeinu Shalom. Here we come to another halacha. The Rebbe continues. The halacha regarding hektish. We mentioned before that the Rambam's opinion is that hektish is different than hedyet, than regular dealings. But by hektish, in other words, when one makes up his mind that he will give the fruit that is due to grow, he will give these fruits for the Beis HaMikdash or for tzedakah, it's a perfect arrangement. That's what the Rambam paskins. Because when we're talking about hektish, in other words, in spiritual sense, hektish meaning mitzvahs. What's hektish? Mitzvahs. Tzedakah. So again, it's mitzvahs. Here, Rabbi used the expression, it's a lumdisha terminology the Rebbe refers to it many times, the Ragatshava's Svarim. His approach in learning was very popular with this phrasing. There's an inyan of an Isser Gavre and an Isser Chefze. Very briefly, not getting into the details, we know we are things which we are forbidden to do. Question is, does it mean that the person is forbidden to do this thing? Or, which means Isser Gavre in Aramaic, it's an Isser and the Gavre means together, a man, a person. Or is it an Isser Chefza? The Isser is on the object. In other words, let me bring in something which the Rebbe did not mention, but just to clarify it, we should be able to understand it a little bit in our minds. And I don't mean to get into the details of this lamdas, but this is used in many inyanim. To bring a very simple example, Chametz and Pesach is explained that we have to say that Chametz and Pesach is an Isser Gavre. It's an Isser on the person to eat Chametz. Why? You cannot say that Chametz, there's something wrong with Chametz. There's nothing wrong with Chametz. Chametz is a piece of bread which a day before and a day after it's heter. It's not treif. So that is why the Achreinim explain that the concept of the Isser of Chametz bePesach is an Isser Gavre. It's an Isser on the man. Let us take, for example, meat which comes from a treifa animal, which we are not allowed to eat under any circumstances, is an Isser Chefze. The Isser is that this object is treifa. There's an Isser on the Chefze, on this thing, on this item, that it is Asr. Again, this is something which can be discussed for many hours, and getting involved in what is the difference if we learn this way, or what is the difference if we learn the other way. I'm just trying to explain it a little bit as an example. The Rebbe here is using these terms as well regarding hektish. Regarding hektish, it becomes an Isser Gavre. In other words, the person has accepted upon himself that he is dedicating something to hektish. He is giving something to tzedakah. So that is why here he was given like a special power, a special authority was given to him. He's given special koiches that he should be able to live up and fulfill this type of an arrangement of giving away a davar shaloi bali yayla. It's the same in the spiritual sense when we're dealing about doing mitzvahs, which is what hektish is all about. The Torah is given. The halacha has made an exception and said that regarding doing mitzvahs, a person can go ahead and accept upon himself even a davar shaloi bala olam, even commitments for tomorrow, for the day after, and so forth. Why? Because this is a yoke which he's accepting upon himself. It's an Isser Gavre. He's accepting something upon himself which is an exceptional rule. An exception is set here for the simple reason because these are mitzvahs, and mitzvahs which the Rebbe wants we should fulfill. So that is why he's given special power that he will be able to fulfill these mitzvahs. This is just a little bit of a kitzur of what the Rebbe has explained, these halachas, which are famous halachas and nigla and halacha, and which are very extremely famous halachas. And this is a view, how we view them in a spiritual sense, how every inyan in Torah could be interpreted in Pnimiyus HaTorah, al pi Chassidus, and the same b'negei these halachas here which we just discussed. Towards the end of the Farbrengen, after already making the bracha achayna, the Rebbe said that let us not forget that we are still in Golus, and based on what we spoke about in previous Farbrengens, the Rebbe has stressed the importance of simcha, and as the Rebbe used the expression, the shturim, the storm which he made about how important it is that we all be besimcha, is still negeya. We still have to adhere to that, and especially that it is Shabbos, the Rebbe said, it's a very suitable time to accept upon ourselves good decisions that will be fulfilled and carried out by each and every one of us. A good tavach.